Before we begin, two quick programming notes. Next week, we're going to push the Parsha Podcast recording on torchzoom.com to Wednesday evening, because on Tuesday, I'm going to be in Baltimore for a wedding of the son of my friend and longtime friend of Torch, Eric Pines. We're also friends and we're also study partners. We studied my grandfather's book. We even are now studying my own book. He said, I want to study your book together. He had no idea how happy he made me. It made me so happy. Not only he mentioned the book, he wants to study it, and his son's getting married in Baltimore. So I'm going to be there just for the day, but it's on Tuesday, and we typically record on torchzoom.com on Tuesday evenings at 6 p.m. Central. So we're going to push it off, please God, to Wednesday. We'll record on Wednesday night, please God, and then I'll have to hustle to go edit it and prepare it for release later on that night, Wednesday night and Thursday morning. So that's item number one. And then there's another wedding. My first cousin, I think he's my youngest first cousin. His name is Daniel Walby, and he's getting married in Los Angeles. And it's also going to be on Tuesday night, and that's February 10th. And I don't know what we're going to do that week about the Parsha Podcast, because I'm not going to be back before Wednesday night. So I'll probably have to record it earlier in the week. I don't know exactly what the story is going to be that week. But regardless, I'm going to be in Los Angeles for 2 days and one night. We're going to take the red eye back. And I'm happy to announce that we're going to, please God, have a little Parsha Podcast Torch Rabbi Wolbe get together in Los Angeles on February 11th. Please God. We did this in the summer in Toronto, and it was delightful. I did like a short talk. I don't know if it qualifies as short in your eyes. Short's always relative. For some people, anything less than 3 minutes is short. For me, short is like less than 2 hours. In our family, my father has a rule. If there's like a family get together and there's a speech, you know his rule. His rule is 5 minutes max. But there's a carve out. There's a carve out. He told me, he said, you could go indefinitely. You have no limitations. So I'm not really trained to speak short. But I'm thinking we'll have like maybe a 30 to 40 minute talk, a talk or a speech or a presentation. I don't know what the topic is. Topic TBD. But we'll have some chit chat, some Q&A, some, I don't know, get together. We'll have whatever it is. We'll have a good time. Please God, in Los Angeles. My friend Alan graciously offered to host it in his house. So it's going to be, please God, on February 11th at 6:30 Pacific time in Los Angeles. If this is something you're interested in joining, let me know. RabbiWolbe@gmail.com. And I'll send you all the information. And I look forward to seeing you if you can make it. I did look at the calendar. It's only a couple of days after the Super Bowl. And from what I understand, there's still a Los Angeles team, part of the Final Four. So it's possible that I'll be there in the hangover, the Super Bowl hangover period. We don't know who's going to win yet. And I was thinking, how will this impact our get-together? If everyone's hungover from the Super Bowl festivities. But then I realized, no, this is Los Angeles. They're not into football. They're into the Dodgers and the Lakers, and that's it. No one in LA actually cares about the Rams, much less the Chargers. So that's the second announcement. It'll be free of any Super Bowl hangover, I'm sure. Los Angeles, get together, 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, February 11th. To all of our friends in the city of dreams, the city of angels, we'd love to see you, RabbiWolbe@gmail.com. It's Parshas Bo, and the plagues, the 10 plagues in Egypt are coming to an end. Last week we had 7 of the 10 plagues. And this is Parsha. We read about the coup de grace. Pharaoh has been talking smack for a long time and he's steadily been humbled with each successive plague. He learns more and more about the God of the Hebrews, the God that he so derided at the beginning of the story. Who is God? Why should I listen to God? That's how Pharaoh started. And now he's going to be humbled with finality, singing a different tune in this week's Parsha. The Parsha begins in the aftermath of the 7th plague of hail. Moshe and Aaron appear to Pharaoh and threaten him with the plague of locust. The locust will cover everything. They'll destroy everything that the hail left standing. It'll be an unprecedented swarm of locusts. And before waiting for a response from Pharaoh, Moshe and Aaron turn around and walk out. And like a spurned used car salesman, Pharaoh chased them down. It's the oldest tactic in the book, right? You do it at the car dealership. You walk out, they'll chase you. They'll chase you down. These are the best salespeople in the world. But they'll chase you. It's guaranteed. It happens all the time. Moshe walks out, and Pharaoh and his servants are debriefing the meeting, and the servants of Pharaoh say, how much more do you have to see? Let them go already. They want to serve their God. Let them do it. Don't you know that Egypt is on the brink of being destroyed? So they summon Moshe and Aaron back. And Pharaoh says, okay, I'll send you. I agree. But I'm worried. I'm worried you're going to leave. You're going to hightail out of here. Leave some representatives behind. You keep the kids here. All the adults go. Keep the kids here. We have a deal. I want a collateral guaranteeing you're not going to abscond out of Egypt permanently. You say you want a 3-day festival. You'll travel for 3 days and you offer sacrifice to God. That's what you want? Go. My answer is yes. Believe the kids behind. And Moshe says, no way. We're going to go with our youth, with our old, with our sons, with our daughters, with our flock, with our cattle. This is a festival unlike any other. The two sides fail to reach terms, and Moshe and Aaron are banished. And indeed, plague number 8 wreaked havoc on all of Egypt. The locusts swarm throughout the land. They covered the land. They darkened the land. And they ate everything, all the grasses, all the growing things, all the fruits, everything that was spared by the hail. There wasn't any vegetation remaining in the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh does his usual shtick. He summons Moshe and Aaron. I sinned this time. Pray to Hashem your God. Remove this death from upon me. And Moshe does that. He prays. And God removes the locust. Not a single one remains. And then, like we saw last week, God strengthens the heart of Pharaoh. It's not going to be so easy. There's darkness. The 9th plague of darkness, like the 3rd, like the 6th, came without warning. There were 3 days of intense darkness, followed by 3 days of paralyzing darkness. That's for the Egyptians. But the Israelites, they had light in all of their dwelling places. Rashi tells us that during these 3 days, the Israelites did some tours. They went on a trip, traveling, checking out all their Egyptian neighbors, their homes, looking and inspecting and finding all the hiding places where they keep all their valuables. And this is going to serve as very useful information, because what's going to happen next is God's going to tell Moshe, command the people, ask of the people, plead with the people to go borrow some gold and some silver and some nice garments for our trip. And of course, all the Egyptians say, I don't know, I got nothing. I'm out. All my money is tied up. I don't have anything liquid. Well, what about that thing in the back of your cupboard? That thing that you hid in your sock drawer? What about all the gold that I saw behind the banister? And they were forced to yield, to accept, to admit, and to lend, to loan their valuables. After the 9th plague, Pharaoh again summons Moshe, and says, okay, last time I offered for you to leave the adults, now take also the children. But leave some animals behind. Leave me with some collateral. And Moshe says, you don't get it. We're going to take absolutely everything. Not only that, you're going to give us some of your animals for our festival. And again, Pharaoh was not allowed to see clearly. God hardened his heart. He did not send the nation out, and he issued a warning. Don't come back. The next time you see me, you're dead. And Moshe says, you bet. You're right. I ain't coming back. Next time implied you are coming to me. But before Moshe left, in the palace, God appeared to Moshe. He had a prophecy in the palace. And God told him, there's one more plague upcoming. And then he's going to send you, he's going to banish you completely. But before that will happen, it's important, says God. Please speak to the nation that they borrow from their friends gold and silver. And then God told Moshe, go tell Pharaoh before you leave about the 10th and final plague, the coup de grace, the death of the firstborn. At around midnight, on the 15th day of Nisan, God himself will go out in Egypt, will reveal himself in Egypt. And all the firstborn will die. The firstborn of Pharaoh, the firstborn of the maidservant, the firstborn even of the animals. And there will be a cry, an outcry that will ring throughout all of Egypt. A cry, unlike anything that happened previously or subsequently. An unprecedented cry will ring out. But amongst the Israelites, Moshe tells Pharaoh, God tells Moshe, go tell Pharaoh, it'll be quiet. Not even a dog will bark. That's how stark the difference will be at the stroke of midnight between the Israelites and the Egyptians. And then, continues Moshe, when this 10th plague happens, your servants, which is a euphemism for you, Moshe didn't want to insult the king, your servants will come to me and will bow before me and will plead with me to leave. And with that, Moshe stormed out. There's a few very interesting points over here. The commentaries observe that God told Moshe, go plead with the Israelites, that they borrow silver and gold and fine garments from the Egyptians. Why is God pleading? So Rashi explains, very interesting, the experience in Egypt, the exile, the enslavement, and the subsequent Exodus were all foretold to Abraham in chapter 15 of Genesis. This is the covenant between the parts. God told Abraham, you should surely know that your descendants, remember at this time, Isaac wasn't even born, but Abraham was foretold, you'll have descendants. They'll be numerous, like the stars, like the sand. And they will be enslaved in a land that's not theirs, va'avadum, and they will be forced to work and tormented for 400 years. And then they will leave with great wealth. The first part of that prophecy happened. They were in Egypt, and they were enslaved and oppressed. But there's the second part, that they will leave with great wealth. God wants to have that fulfilled as well. It's not fair to Abraham that the first half, the bad part, all happened, and the second half, that they will leave with great wealth, that did not happen, and therefore God pleaded, made sure that you borrow all the gold, all the silver. You empty, you exploit Egypt of all its valuables. There's another very interesting essay that I saw this year for the first time. An essay from Rav Hirsch, why God had to plead with the nation. The nation was resistant to doing it. There's something about this experience of going to your Egyptian neighbors and borrowing. I want to borrow it. All your gold, all your precious valuables. The nation didn't want to do it. And Rav Hirsch explains that this was right after the ninth plague of darkness. And the plague of darkness, it was a very intense darkness, followed by a paralyzing darkness. For 3 days, none of the Egyptians were able to move. There was this palpable darkness that froze them in place. And the Israelites were able to maneuver wherever they wanted. It was like they were living in two different worlds. Now suppose, in a modern American city, not even Memphis or St. Louis or Baltimore, any city in the country, suppose people knew that there will be complete, total paralysis amongst the populace for 3 days. The cops are frozen. The guards are frozen. The security guards, everyone's frozen, immobilized. It would be the purge. Chaos and criminality abound. You can walk into any house, take whatever you want. They even had this, like when there's hurricanes and like people are all setting up with their ARs, protecting my property, castle doctrine. That's when people are mobile, but there's a little bit of a lag in the police response. Imagine this 3 days where no one can move. There wouldn't be anything left in anyone's houses. After 3 days, you'd finally be able to move and your house would be completely ransacked, empty. But what happened over here? There was a plague. 3 days of darkness, paralyzing darkness. And the Egyptians got out of that experience. They got out of their paralysis and they inspected their homes. And not a single thing was missing. Not a shoelace, not a leather strap, certainly not any valuables. The Israelites were impeccably honest. And that very much impressed the Egyptians. They gained an appreciation for how refined, how special, how dignified, how noble this nation was. And this is why God had to plead. The plague of darkness, says Rav Hirsch, it created an amazing Kiddush Hashem, sanctification of God's name. Moshe had gained, the verse even tells us that Moshe had gained tremendous esteem in the eyes of the Egyptians, in the eyes of Pharaoh's servants. What's going to happen now? We're going to go borrow from the Egyptians, wink, wink, and they're going to be compelled by God. God's going to shower us with favor. They'll have no choice, really. It'll be another version of their hearts being hardened, their free will being suspended. And what happens 3 days later? Where's all our valuables? Oh, those Jews, they stole it. They took it. They borrowed it for good. That would tarnish the reputation of the Israelites. And that would ruin the amazing Kiddush Hashem, the amazing sanctification of God's name that was achieved by the plague of darkness. So God had to plead. Fascinating idea, courtesy of Rav Hirsch. Now, the 9th plague is darkness. The 10th plague is the plague of the death of the firstborn. And whenever these plagues are enumerated, we find something very interesting and unusual. For example, in the Haggadah by the Seder, we list them. Dam, Tzfardea, Kinim, Arov, Dever, Shchin, Barat, Arbe, Choshech, Makas, Bechoros. Those are the 10 names of the 10 plagues. And they were all plagues, which means a Makkah. In Hebrew is a Makkah, which means like a plague. They were smitten with a plague. But only one of the plagues is called a plague. And the commentaries asked a very interesting question. How come the first plague of blood, of dam, is not called the plague of blood, it's just called blood? And the second plague of fraud is just called Tzfardea. It's not even called the plague of Tzfardea, and so on. The first 9 plagues are not identified as plagues. They're just called the item, darkness, locust, pestilence, and so on. You get to the 10th plague, it's called Makas Bechoros, the plague of the firstborn. It's a bit of a interesting question. So I had thought when I heard this question, I thought, well, maybe there really is only one plague. When Moshe initially came to Pharaoh, the verse tells us that God tells Moshe, tell Pharaoh, if you don't listen, I'm going to kill your firstborn. Before anything happened, before the miracles and the signs and the wonders and the preliminary plagues, God told Moshe told Pharaoh of the plague of the firstborn. And I saw some of the commentaries suggest that there's really only one plague. Everything else was paving the path. So maybe that's why the naming scheme, the nomenclature, is different. But here's another idea from our sages. Very interesting. Some information that you never heard before, I imagine. If you did, send me an email. Moshe receives his palace prophecy. Pharaoh banishes him. You'll never see me again. And Moshe says, okay, yes, but let me tell you one more thing before I leave. And he tells him about the death of the firstborn. He forewarns him at midnight. The firstborn of the Egyptians, human and animal, are going to die. Our sages tell us that this prophecy was heard not only by the people in the room, but all the firstborn of Egypt themselves heard it. All the firstborn, wherever they were, they received the prophecy from Moshe. They were forewarned of the impending plague of the death of the firstborn. It was broadcast to all the firstborn throughout Egypt. Now Pharaoh laughed it off. The verse even tells us that when midnight happened, he was in bed. He was asleep. He did not take Moshe seriously. But all the Egyptian firstborn, they had already seen the credibility of Moshe and his warnings, so they went nuts. And they launched a campaign against the Egyptians. It was a civil war within Egypt, the firstborn against everyone else. Release them. Maybe we can forestall this terrible plague. And many Egyptians were killed, not by God, not by some plague, but by their own, by the Egyptian firstborn themselves. So what the commentaries suggest, the plague of the firstborn is not a reference necessarily to the death of the firstborn, but rather the plague perpetrated by the firstborn of Egypt against Egypt themselves. Very interesting, and some backstage insights into what was happening. Now the narrative of the Parsha returns to the Israelites. As I mentioned last week, the focus has been for Parsha and a half, it's been entirely on Pharaoh and the Egyptians and how they're processing what's happening, what God is doing. Now the focus is returning to the Israelites, Moshe and Aaron, to some of the people. This is on the first day of Nisan, and they give them the law. The first law given to the nation is the law of the calendar. This month is the first month of the calendar. Even though the year cycle begins with Tishrei, with Rosh Hashanah, the cycle of the months begin with the month of Nisan. In the Torah, there are no proper names for months. They're only given numbers. And the first month is the month of Nisan, the month of the Exodus. Whenever you mention a name of a month, a number of a month, you are in fact referencing the Exodus. And the nation is commanded about the law of the paschal lamb. They're told that on the 10th of the month, so that's 10 days hence, 4 days prior to the day before the Exodus, 5 days prior to the Exodus, they have to go and take a lamb. And it has to be unblemished. It has to be male. It has to be a year old. It could be from the sheep or from the goats. And they have to watch it for 4 days until the 14th day of Nisan. So they're talking on the first day of Nisan. They're told about what they have to do on the 10th and the 11th and the 12th and the 13th and the 14th. They have to guard it. They have to safeguard it, to watch it for 4 days. The Midrash tells us that they were commanded to tie it to their bed, keep a close eye on it, make sure it doesn't get any blemishes. And then on the 14th day, in the afternoon, they must slaughter it and take the blood that erupts from the animal and mix it with some other things and slather it on their doors, the doorposts, the lintels of their house. And then they have to roast the paschal lamb on a spit, barbecued on the fire. And they have to eat it that night. And they have to finish the whole thing. No leftovers. If you have any leftovers, you have to burn it. And how are they supposed to eat it? Fully dressed, with their walking stick in their hand, with their shoes on their feet, in a rush. Because on this night, they're going to leave. And there's no dilly-dallying. You won't have time to prepare. You're going to leave very, very quickly. And on this night, the nation is told, God will strike every Egyptian firstborn, both human and animal, and will punish the gods of Egypt. And when God reveals himself there in Egypt, the blood is on your doorposts. It will protect you. God promises to jump over, to pass over your homes. And there won't be a plague that affects you when God strikes Egypt. And this, the nation's told, again, this is before the Exodus. Before the Exodus, they're told, every year, henceforth, you must do the same thing. You must celebrate this festival. It's a 7-day festival. The first day, the last day are holy. You have to eat matzah, you can eat chametz, and so on. You must guard the matzah to remember the miracle, to remember the Exodus. Now, of course, there's all sorts of fascinating elements here to ponder. All the different laws of the paschal lamb. It has to be roasted. Why? Commentaries tell us it's tastier. Barbecue, it's tastier. And it's quicker. Because you want to cook it, it takes a long time to cook it. But the Exodus has to be fast. And that's why it's symbolized with the roasting. Oh, and the aroma of barbecue, it spreads much further than the meat that you cook in a pot. You've seen that there's a pot, and you got to kind of open the pot, got to stick your nose all the way in to smell anything. But when there's a barbecue, the neighbor down the block is making a barbecue, everyone can smell it. And it's important. The aroma of the barbecuing sheep must blanket the whole land. And I say this tell us that the sheep was the deity of Egypt. Actually, it says it explicitly in Scripture. Pharaoh initially says, do your festival here. And Moshe says to Pharaoh, we can't do it here because the animals that we want to slaughter for God is your deity. And if we do it over here, you'll slaughter us. We have to leave. We have to go out of town. And now, before they leave, what are they doing? They're taking the deity of Egypt, those sheep, and they're buying it on the 10th, and they're watching it to the 14th, and they're slaughtering it, and they're taking the blood and slathering it all over their house, and they're barbecuing the animals. And everyone knows, the whole land, it's like Memorial Day. It's July 4th. Everyone's doing a barbecue. Everyone has a full lamb on a spit, roasting really slowly. And all the Egyptians have to smell the aroma of their deities slaughtered and being barbecued by the Israelites. Now, the Ramban has a nice essay over here where he explains that there's also the astrological sign of the month of Nisan is also the sheep. So this is like the peak of the power of Egypt. And they're going to be trounced at the height of the month with their deity. I mean, this is like when the Egyptians are destroying. It's the 15th of the month of Nisan, the month that is represented by the sheep, which is their deity. We're going to slaughter their deity, and we're going to trounce them and run out of their land, escape their land, but not escape. We're going to leave as teams rushed out by the Egyptians. Now, there's a fascinating Rashi here that tells us some other things that had to happen over there before the Exodus. The day before the Exodus, there was also a mass circumcision. In Egypt, the Israelites, with the exception of the Levites, the Israelites ceased circumcising their boys. The Levites maintained that, the mitzvah of Abraham, but the Israelites stopped doing it. And on the day before the Exodus, meaning the 14th day of Nisan, the same day that they slaughtered and slathered and roasted on a spit, that same day, they circumcised. Hundreds of thousands of circumcisions on one day. Which day? The day right before we're traveling. In the words of the Midrash, the blood of the Paschal lamb and the blood of all that circumcision commingled. The blood and the blood. That's pretty dramatic. And Rashi tells us that there was a reason for this. Citing a verse in Ezekiel, the Exodus had to happen. The time was ripe. But they were, in the words of the prophet, they were spiritually naked. They didn't have the merits that they needed for the Exodus. And therefore God gave them 2 mitzvos. The day before you leave, 2 mitzvos, blood and blood. The blood of the Paschal offering and the blood of the circumcision. These bloods will give you life. Moreover, tells us Rashi, the Israelites themselves were idolaters. The Israelites themselves had deified those aforementioned sheep. And it's important. Take those sheep that you had deified and withdraw yourself from it. Withdraw from those idols. And how do you withdraw from the idols? You take something which is so sacred, sacrosanct. Oh, the sheep, the deities. Slaughter it and take the blood and pronounce it to the whole world, publish it to the whole world that this is the blood of that former deity of mine. And take that animal and roast it so everyone knows exactly what you did, exactly what you eschewed, exactly what you walked away from. With these 2 mitzvos, with these 2 bloods, the blood of the Paschal offering, the blood of the circumcision, the nation earned the merits for the Exodus. Moshe summoned the nation. He gave them the instructions, and they heeded. They listened. There's a very interesting verse in 12:28. The verse says that after Moshe told this to the nation on the first day of the month of Nisan, Vayelchu vaya'asu b'nei Israel. They went and they did it. They performed it. What they were commanded to do. So Moshe tells them on the first day of Nisan that on the 10th day of Nisan, you have to buy the Paschal lamb, and then you watch it. 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th. The 14th, you slaughter it, you slather it, you circumcise, you barbecue it. And Rashi has a question, wait a minute. Moshe conveys all this to the nation on the first day of the month. How can I say that they went and they did it? Because he's speaking to them on the 1st, not on the 10th. Very interesting question Rashi asked. Just we know that keep track of the timeline. How can you say that they went and they did it when they had to wait 10 days before they did it? That's Rashi's question. Now, if this was just a question about the timeline and the chronology, you would say, okay, well, this is the Parsha Podcast. We're going backstage here. Like, why are you being so pedantic about it? But Rashi's answer is amazing. Rashi says, the verse is saying that they went and they did it on the 1st of the month. But they have to do it on the 10th of the month. What does it mean to do something? Once they committed to do something, Scripture considers it as if they did it. They did it on the 1st of the month, but they actually only did it in reality on the 10th. But in the eyes of the Torah, where is the logjam? Where's the bottleneck? Where's the actual difficulty? Where's the point of leverage in any great transformation? It's not in the implementation, it's in the decision. They made a decision on that day. They heard something that was terrifying, do you imagine? 210 years in Egypt. And they become prolific idolaters like the Egyptians. And now they're told, in 10 days, you buy that lamb that's so revered, and you watch it tied to your bed, fully aware of what's going to happen to this lamb. And you have to watch, make sure it doesn't get any blemishes. And you have to slaughter it. That's like unbelievable for an idolater. And you take the blood and you publicize it, and you barbecue it. That's a lot to handle. And the nation made a commitment. We will do it. In the eyes of God, in the eyes of the Torah, they did it already. We have a bit of a misunderstanding, Rashi's telling us. Where exactly does a great transformation happen? If we were to look at this story, we would say, well, it happened on the 10th. The 10th, they bought it, and then they watched it for 4 days, and then they slaughtered it. Wow, what tremendous guts to be able to walk away from a whole lifetime of idolatry. What brave, and then to roast it so everyone knows what they're doing? Amazing. Says the Torah, no. The real transformation happened on the 1st when they agreed to do it. Once a firm decision has been made, everything else is just, you're just coloring within the lines. It's already in the bank, not in the bank, but it's a breeze compared to that conviction, that decision that you made at the time. Very interesting, very powerful idea. Rashi 12:28 of Exodus. The verses tell us about the events of the Passover night. Indeed, at the stroke of midnight, God struck every firstborn in the land of Egypt. All firstborn. Firstborn to the father, not the mother, dead. Firstborn to the mother, not the father, dead. If a house had no firstborn, whoever's the oldest, dead. What if it's a female, the oldest? Dead. All at the stroke of midnight. The Midrash tells us there was only one survivor. Very interesting Midrash. I saw it today for the first time. There was only one survivor. One Egyptian, firstborn, who survived. Daughter of Pharaoh. Adopted mother of Moshe. A woman we know as Basia or Batya, the princess. She had a defender, the words of the Midrash. She had a defender. She was the firstborn of Egypt, and she survived. And Pharaoh woke up. In the night, there's a great outcry in Egypt. There's not a single house that does not have a dead person in it. And he rushed to Moshe and Aaron in the night, in his pajamas, according to the song. And he told them, leave, go serve God as you asked, take everything, the people and the animals, everything. They rushed him out, they hastened him out. They were terrified that they would all die. And the nation took their dough, their unbaked dough, placed it on their shoulders, and they went to the neighbors. They borrowed the gold and the silver, the vessels, and the garments. And God bestowed grace and favor of them in the eyes of the Egyptians, and they were able to exploit and empty and vacate Egypt from all its wealth. And the nation, 600,000 strong. That's just the adults. Together with loads of mixed multitude, endless flock, endless cattle, they left. They traveled from Ramses to Sukkot, which, by the way, is about a 200-kilometer, 100-plus mile journey. And there, they baked their unbaked dough. The dough was made in Egypt, and they baked it in Sukkos, and it was still unleavened. That's how fast the Exodus happened. And the verse tells us that they had no provisions with them. They followed God into the wilderness. This is a praise of the nation. We're going on a bear hunt. We're going to catch a big one. We're going to the desert. It's a big desert. Let's bring lots of food, lots of water. No. They brought their faith. They had no provisions, just some unbaked dough. They relied on God. And this is an eternal kindness, in the words of the prophet, of our people. This is the seminal night of all of history. Isaiah tells us it's the night of creation. It's the night that God appeared to Abraham. It's the night of the fiery furnace. It's the night of the war of the 4 kings against the 5 kings. It's the night of the covenant between the parts. It's the night of the Exodus. And it's the night of the future redemption. That's why we open the door fully expecting to meet Elijah, heralding the redemption. The Parsha proceeds with God telling Moshe and Aaron some more laws of the paschal offering, and the last two paragraphs of the Parsha are two of the paragraphs included in the tefillin compartments. The story of the Exodus, the Ramban explains, is something that we want to wear, to don as an adornment every day in our tefillin, both on our arm, opposite our heart, on our head, on top of our brain. We adorn ourselves with the story of the Exodus. This is an important story. This is a story that we must always remember, relive, and never forget. We're commanded to tell it over every day, in the morning and at night. We have all sorts of mitzvos related to it. And we wrap it, we bind it to ourselves, to our mind, to our heart, to our emotions, to our intellect every single day. Of course, that's his Parsha. We're going to pick up the story. The nation's leaving, and then Pharaoh has some reservations. He gets some cold feet, and he makes a very, very poor decision. That's the Parsha. Let's go a bit backstage. After all, that's the theme of Year 10 of the Parsha Podcast. Let's see what else we can learn behind the scenes. We read the book of Exodus, and we're reading about the nation going to Egypt. And they're under the protection of Joseph, but then he dies, and his brothers die, and the whole generation dies. And the nation is mistreated. And there's a new Pharaoh in town. And he doesn't remember Joseph. And he begins to make special taxes and infanticide and harsh labor. It's terrible. And we kind of take it for granted as a given that the Israelites were enslaved for hundreds of years. The descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, of these great beacons, they're enslaved. Oh, and then they're redeemed. Amazing. With these miracles, with these wonders. Why did this all happen? Why did the nation have to experience the years of servitude? What's the backstory? What's the origin of the time in Egypt? And how do we understand the years of servitude and what's happening over here with the Exodus? So we mentioned earlier already that the Egyptian experience was foretold to Abraham at the covenant between the parts, chapter 15 of Genesis. God told Abraham, Yadoa Teda, you should surely know that your descendants will be foreigners in a land that's not theirs. They'll be enslaved and oppressed for 400 years, and afterwards they will leave with great wealth. This is before Abraham even had any children. He was 70. This is 30 years before the birth of Isaac. And he's already been told about his descendants, who will be as numerous as the stars and the sand, who will inherit the land of Israel, who will be God's people. They're going to have to endure a multi-century enslavement in a foreign land. Why? Why did the Israelites, the people, the nation of Abraham, from the very beginning of their nationhood, from the nascent stages of this great people, even before Isaac is born, it's already established that they're going to have these hundreds of years of servitude. Now, if you look at this narrative very carefully, chapter 15 of Genesis, you find something very interesting. God told Abraham about the 400 years of enslavement, but this was not unprompted. It was an answer to a question. Abram asked a question, and this was God's answer. Chapter 15 begins, this is in Genesis. Abram is told wonderful things. Don't be scared, Abraham. By the way, then he's still called Abram. He hasn't been renamed Abraham quite yet. Abraham is comforted. Scharcha harbe me'od, your reward is great. Wow, that sounds great. God tells you, you have a lot of reward. Amazing. And Abram says, well, what's it worth for me? I'm childless. I'm barren. All I have is my student, Eliezer. You didn't give me any children, says Abram to God. Who's going to inherit me? My nephew, Lot? Eliezer, my disciple? So God tells him, no. Your own child will inherit you. And he takes him outside and brings him above the stars and says, look at the stars, count the stars. Could he count them? Your children will be like the stars. And God again continues, I am Hashem. I took you out of the fiery furnace of Egypt to give you this land, the land of Canaan, as an inheritance. So Abraham was given a blessing, a reward, and then he says, well, what about children? You'll have that, and they'll inherit the land. And then Abraham asks a question. Vayomer, and he said, Bama Eda, how or through what will I know that I will inherit the land? Abram is asking a question. It's a very perplexing question. And there's a lot of literature about this. Abram is asking a question of God. How do I know? You told me all these wonderful things. I'll have this nation and they'll do great and they'll inherit the land and they'll be like the stars. How do I know? No, to us, that's a very perplexing question. God just told you. There's no greater verification than the literal word of God. So I was trying to figure out what Abraham is asking. How is that an appropriate question? Is he failing to believe God? Hard to imagine. And to that question, God responded, you should surely know that your descendants will be enslaved in a foreign land for 400 years, and they'll be tormented and mistreated. And then they will leave with great wealth. And the nation that judges them, that enslaves them, I will judge. It's not clear to us what Abraham's question was and what God's answer is. And again, this is the first mention of Egypt. This is the foundation of both the Egyptian enslavement and exile and the Egyptian redemption, the Exodus. So I want to suggest an idea. Abram is told very good news. You'll have a child, a biological child. And he will inherit the land. He will inherit you. You will have a nation like the stars that will illuminate the whole world, that will bring the world to its perfection, that will finish what you began. And Abram asks a question. You promised me all these wonderful rewards. Even earlier, I will bless those who bless you. You'll be the source of blessing. You'll have the land of Israel. You'll be God's people. You'll bring the world to its destiny. That's fantastic. But we know that every promise of God is contingent on the recipient of that promise being worthy. So Abraham himself, he's the paragon, the portrait of righteousness. But God's telling him you'll have a nation like the stars, an innumerable nation. And each member of the nation will be like a star. You'll have an endless, an infinite nation, and each one of them will be like a whole star that can illuminate the whole world. Who's to say that every descendant of Abraham will be as righteous as Abraham, as worthy as Abraham? Abraham's one person. But we're not talking about Abraham. We're talking about a whole nation that will emerge from him. All his descendants, the whole nation that he will spawn. Who's to say that they will be worthy? They will be like Abraham. Who said that the Abrahamic influence will remain years down the line, generations down the line? God's telling Abraham, you're deserving of the land. Sure. Your descendants will have the land. Well, that's only if they too are deserving. God does not dispense gifts for free. Are you worthy? Who is to guarantee that Abraham's descendants will be up to snuff? That was Abraham's question. And what's the answer? The answer has something to do with the experience in Egypt and the Exodus. I want to suggest an idea. The Midrash asks a fundamental question. In what merit did the nation experience the redemption from Egypt? They were idolaters, like the Egyptians. By the splitting of the sea, the angel said, wait a minute. It's the same picture. These are idolaters, and these are idolaters. Why are you saving these and drowning these? Says the Midrash, there were 4 attributes, 4 things in whose merit the nation was saved. They did not switch their names, did not switch their language, they didn't speak Lashon Hara, and they were not promiscuous. Now, this Midrash is, anytime you hear this Midrash, it's misquoted. There's an additional clause to this Midrash, which I did not find in any Midrashic literature. It's added on for some reason universally. So you look up this Midrash and it's going to be misquoted. Just trust me. Midrash is always quoted as they didn't switch their names, their language. That is actually found in the Midrash. And then there's a third clause. They didn't switch their garments. It's universally appended to this Midrash. And I don't know why. It is actually found in later sources. It's not in the Midrash. It's not the same Midrash. It's the same concept, though. Now, we know Lashon Hara is like one of the worst sins that there is. So if the nation does not speak Lashon Hara, that's a worthy attribute for the Exodus. And they were moral. They were not promiscuous. That's also a worthy attribute. But a name, preserving the naming schemes and language, why is that significant? To answer that question, we find another fantastic Midrash. Midrash says when the nation was in Egypt and when they left Egypt, they did not change their names or their language. And when the angels witnessed this, they started singing. And they said, wow, look at these people. They must have some element of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob within them. Look at them. They didn't switch their names. They did not switch their language. They must have people amongst them who are akin to Abraham, to Isaac, and Jacob. Our sages are telling us that the mere fact that the nation did not switch their names and their language, that is evidence. That's evidence enough for the angels to sing and celebrate the fact that they are like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. What does that possibly mean? Here's the idea. The nation in Egypt had very little to do with Abraham, with Isaac, and Jacob. Yeah, there were some pockets of righteousness. The Levites circumcised their sons, but the nation as a whole, they didn't even circumcise their children. The one mitzvah given to Abraham, the one mark of an Abrahamic family member, they rejected. And they did idolatry like the Egyptians. Abraham, his whole life was, as a little kid, he took the sledgehammer and smashed all the idols. We know that story. His father was a purveyor of idols. He had a big warehouse. I'm going on vacation. Abraham, watch my factory. Any potential client who walked in, he says, why are you buying an idol? These are silly. They're useless. What do you mean? This is our idols. No, they're not. Go learn about the one invisible God. We'll talk about it. And then if his father shows up, Terach shows up, and he finds that they're all shattered. And Abraham says, well, they were having a scuffle, a fight. And one of them grabbed the hammer and started smashing the other ones. And look, there's one of them that remained. He's holding a big sledgehammer. He says, well, no, that's not possible. They're wood and metal figurines. Well, so why are we bowing down to them? Oh, Abraham is taken, he's arrested, and they throw him into the fiery furnace. Sacrilege. That's Abraham and his descendants. They themselves are doing idolatry. What's going on over here? They descended from such giants, but we find no traces or no apparent traces of Abraham within them. The only thing we find They maintained their language and their names. Says the Midrash. There was something left, as small, as tenuous, as faint as it could be, sure, but there was some kernel that not even hundreds of years of idolatry can wipe out. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob may have been forgotten from the people. We spoke last week. Jacob died 193 years before the Exodus. I challenge anyone. I don't know if anyone did this. I challenge them. Give me an antecedent of yours who passed away in 1829. I didn't get any emails. I'll have to hit refresh. I didn't get any emails that say, oh, I actually have my family tree all the way back to the 1700s, 1500s. It's ancient history. They're doing idolatry. Why? Because they're Egyptians. But why are their names different? Why are they speaking a different language? What's going on over here? There's something about Abraham, something distinctly Abraham, that nothing can eliminate. Abraham is still within them. Isaac, Jacob, it's all still within them. It's hard to access, it's hard to appreciate, but it is there. And nothing can remove that. Despite everything the nation experienced, some modicum of the influence of Abraham still coursed strongly within them. They maintained something of the culture of Abraham. They were distinct in their language, in their names. And that proves that no matter what, the spirit of Abraham endures. It still exists within his descendants. Sure, they were influenced by their Egyptian neighbors that became idolaters. Behaviorally, you could say that they were indistinguishable from the Egyptians. But there was a slight, faint, shimmering ember, an ember of Abraham that still glowed within them, that was not extinguished, no matter what. 210 years of subservience and subjugation. Hundreds of years removed from the end of the lifetimes of these luminaries. The angels are saying that there's something there. I see Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Let's sing. Let's celebrate. Immense Abrahamic power exists in the hearts of these enslaved Israelites. Abraham was told, good news. Good news. You'll have a nation like the stars. Like the stars, and they'll inherit you. And they will earn this great land. And they will be your continuity. And Abraham says, wait a minute, but maybe my influence will erode over time. And maybe the people will do their own thing. Who's to say that what I achieved will be permanent? And God says, okay, we'll find out. You're correct, Abraham. The only way to have this blessing is if what you achieve is really, truly permanent. And I will show you how it's permanent. I will bring them to a state, to such a sad, sorry, depressed state, where in no visible way they could possibly maintain what you're maintaining. And even then, it will be undeniable that your influence still remains. Now, the nation, before they were allowed to go, they were naked from mitzvos. And God gave them a few mitzvos. The blood of the paschal offering, the blood of the circumcision. The nation was displaying an example. They're manifesting an example of how their connection with Abraham wasn't just surface level, wasn't just language, wasn't just culture. It's there. Abraham, how did he start? He started by shattering the idols. and being willing to be an outcast by everyone he knew. And when he shattered those idols, he was thrown into a fire. And God saved him. The nation is told, I want you to do what Abraham did. Take your idol. I don't want you to just slaughter it right now. You have 10 days to prepare about what's going to happen. On the 10th day, I want you to buy it, but even then, don't slaughter it. Hold it for 4 days. Make sure you know exactly what you're doing. You're not rushing into this. And then we take a knife, sharp knife, and slaughter the deity of Egypt, and the deity of yours on some level. And catch the blood and slather it. You don't care what anyone else thinks. You're like Abraham. And then Abraham, he risked his life for this. I want you to do the same. You're not hiding this in your house. You're publicizing it. And then you're taking it and you're roasting it. And the smell is going to spread throughout the whole land. And every single Egyptian who we're told earlier in the Torah, Moshe said to Pharaoh, if we slaughter the deity of Egypt, they will slaughter us. This was the equivalent of them being cast into the fiery furnace. Are you willing to do it? Are you like Abraham? The blood of the Paschal offering demonstrated that this nation, it's not just something incidental. Oh, they speak the language and the naming scheme. We see the same exact attribute. Look, they're like Abraham. No matter what, nothing can wash it away. Yes, they may behave in a way that's very un-Abrahamic, but that's just surface. The truth, the heart of the matter, who they really are, it's still Abraham. Abraham was given one mitzvah, circumcision. That's the second blood. Circumcision. The day before you travel, hundreds of thousands of Jews took a sharp knife and circumcised themselves. The day before it's time to leave Egypt. The day before moving, right? You don't schedule elective surgeries. It's elective. You want to make sure that you're healed from that, right? Day before we're traveling. We're going to flex our Abrahamic muscles. We're going to circumcise the day before. The blood of the Pesach, the blood of the meal, it's mimicking Abraham. We're going to roast the deity of Egypt. Just as Abraham destroyed the idols and was thrown to the fire as a result, was willing to die to repudiate idolatry, we'll do the same. Moshe and Aaron already told us, anyone who touched the deity of Egypt will be slaughtered. We don't care. We're doing it. We're like Abraham. The mitzvah of Abraham, circumcision, we're going to do that. And they went into the wilderness. The first commandment given to Abraham is Lech Lecha, leave, depart. Again, the mark of Abraham is found in his descendants. Notwithstanding hundreds of years and all that tumult and chaos and all that surface level of apparent anti-Abraham behavior, they're going into the unknown, just like Abraham. They follow God. They trust him. They don't have any provisions. They have nothing but their faith. I had a suspicion that we could probably identify within the Exodus story all 10 of Abraham's 10 trials. The nation is exhibiting the same attributes, the same characteristics that Abraham had. For example, we know, our sages tell us that 80% of the Israelites did not make it out. The Exodus was the nation saying goodbye to close relatives, just as Abraham had to send Ishmael away. It was an act of faith to walk away, to leave, to depart. Abram, at the coming of the parts, he's trying to assess what is the extent of the Abrahamic attributes and qualities and way of life. How deeply has this penetrated me and my descendants? How do I know that it will endure? That's the story of the exile and the Exodus. For hundreds of years, the nation was placed into the most challenging circumstances. And Abraham and his genes and his attributes endured. I was thinking today about the flip side of this. We see an example of something which is the exact opposite of this. Esau developed a hatred for Jacob. And he wanted to kill him. And then 34 years later, he still wanted to kill him. And 3,400 years later, Esau's anti-Semitism, it still courses within the blood of many of his descendants. It has some tremendous staying power. It has a degree of permanence to it. Why do some people just hate the Jews? Well, it's the power of Esau. It's the ember of Esau. They don't know it, but we do. Abraham, this is the positive side, he accomplished amazing feats, accomplishments in his life. And he earned many great promises from God. As a result, he's worthy of that. Are those shiny objects that will burn away, that will fizzle away? How will it endure? With the Exodus, the nation flexed their Abrahamic muscles. No one can doubt that the spirit of Abraham still runs strong. Now, the truth is, the Midrash tells us that only 20% of Abraham's descendants indeed exhibited his attributes. But within that 20%, they are unflappably Abrahamic. And I think about, our standing as the descendants of these Israelites. Whoever survived, they're part of the 20%. And if you were able to survive that maelstrom of Egypt, and you're still exhibiting the characteristics of Abraham, absolutely nothing can shake that. And even today, there are many descendants of these people who, if you were to look at them, you find nothing. You don't see any fingerprints of Abraham. Even the names. There's no more names. It is interesting that the last two mitzvos that people still tenaciously observe are circumcision and Passover. The blood of the paschal offering, the blood of the circumcision. They don't know why. I know why. We know why. The ember of Abraham still burns strongly within them. And not everyone appreciates this. But whoever survived, whoever made it out, is a prince of the Abrahamic legacy. And the Exodus, Passover, that's when that little burning, flickering flame, that tiny ember, was fanned to life. There was a teeny point that remained, and the angels saw it. We wouldn't see it. The angels, they were singing, "This is like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And they're right, because once it's there, and it's there and can't be shaken or withdrawn, there is a process by which it can be fanned to life. The Exodus brought that tiny little point of holiness, of Abrahamic holiness, that little ember, into a massive fire, a conflagration, a beacon of Abraham. That's what happened during the first Exodus. By the way, that's what happens every year by the Exodus. The little point of Abrahamic holiness burns quite brightly. It's a deeper look at the Parsha, at the whole story. We're 12, 13 chapters into Exodus. Now we're reading about this like, we're here, and now we're leaving. And there's a deep message. It starts with Abraham. The first mention of it is with Abraham. And this proves for all time that nothing, absolutely nothing, can vanquish, can extinguish the ember of Abraham. I see we went a bit over time. That's okay. I always think an hour, that's probably too much to ask. Maybe keep it at 55 minutes, but now I see it's went even longer. So most of the people, I'm sure, just dropped out already. I have an hour tolerance for this, but that's okay. They'll never know what we talked about over here at the end of the Parsha Podcast. I appreciate you listening and joining us for this wonderful study. My email just says, rabbi@gmail.com. Send me an email. Come hang out with the Wolbies. Come visit us here in Houston, Texas. Have a wonderful day. Have a sensational rest of your week. An uplifting and magnificent and terrific and splendid and stupendous Shabbos upcoming. And please God, with the help of the Almighty, as He helps us each week. I tell you, today, this morning, like even this afternoon, there was no podcast. There was no podcast. There was maybe like the ember of the podcast. We had maybe a little ember of the podcast. We had a little ember. But what can I say? I always say it's the help of the Almighty. You're like, oh, this is just Rabbi Wolby babbling, right? That's what you think. I know that's fine because I say it all the time. But it's really with the help of the Almighty. I kind of pinch myself. I'm looking at like, oh my gosh, I looked at my notes. Parshas Bo 5780, 5781, 5782, 5783. I'm like, wow, how did I merit to do this? And I know the answer. I'll say it over here publicly. It's the Almighty. I think it's in your merit. It's just, I decided to do the Parsha podcast, and you decided to listen, and in your merit, the Almighty says, well, I can't embarrass the Wolbies, can't embarrass the Torch Center, I'm going to have these people click and refresh, and nothing there, I can't do that to them. So in your honor, I have a Parsha podcast, but really it's with the help of the Almighty. So with the help of the Almighty, we'll come together again next week for another edition of the Parsha Podcast. And again, the image says, Rabbi Wolby at gmail.com.